Hi, welcome to For Better for Verse, the podcast where a married couple and their dog takes on the scriptures. I'm Justin Crisp.
I'm Jewelle Bickel, and today we're talking about Luke chapter 10, starting with the Good Samaritan parable, and then through chapter 11.
For those of you who are joining us on YouTube, you will see video of our dog Val, who is dressed up in her Halloween costume, which is a dinosaur. That matches the dinosaur costume that our 1-year-old Beatrice is also going to wear. Good job, Val. Good job.
She wishes you all a very happy Halloween.
Absolutely. We have a lot to cover here in chapters 10 and 11. We have the parable of the Good Samaritan. We have an exchange between Jesus in the household of Mary and Martha with Mary and Martha. We have Jesus' teaching on prayer, his introduction of the Lord's Prayer, and some commentary, barbed commentary, I'll say, on Pharisees and lawyers and scribes. So with that, let's let
get
our
started.
dog go, our dino dog go, and get started with the parable of the Good Samaritan. What do you make of this, Jewel?
Yeah, this one's tricky, and by tricky, I mean it's probably one of the most well-known parables in the Bible, so there's a very good chance that the people listening have heard a really good sermon on it at some point in time. Well, I don't think we're going to say anything particularly new, but perhaps we can remind them of some of the things that they heard when they heard that sermon long ago. Basic story. We have a man. He's walking along a road, gets beat up by robbers, right? Priest walks by him. He's laying half dead, having been attacked. Priest keeps on walking. Then a Levite.
Levites are the assistants of the priests in the temple.
And so the Levite comes and sees him, walks past him. And then a Samaritan comes in. We'll talk about that more in a little bit.
Yeah.
And he takes him in and cares for him. And this is all an answer to the question of who is my neighbor?
Jesus is giving this parable in response to a lawyer who, it says, this is verse 25 of Luke chapter 10, a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. One of the things that we're going to see here as Jesus moves closer and closer to Jerusalem, to his death, is that people are going to become increasingly hostile towards him in the crowd. So far, lots of people have been responding to Jesus's magnetism, to his healing abilities, to his power over the spiritual and the physical realm, and also to the captivating character of his message and his preaching. He's had some people who've been skeptical of him. It's not like these folks have all been positive. After his first sermon at his home synagogue in Nazareth, after all, they try to hurl Jesus off of a cliff, but we are going to find as we move from chapter 10 on that there are these particular groups of religious and social leaders in ancient Judea, first century Judea, who are going to become outright hostile to Jesus, try to trip him up. So this lawyer is standing up to test Jesus, to try to catch him in something. He says, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus responds, "Well, what is written in the law? What do you read there?" Jesus knows he'll be safe if he starts out, as it were, quoting the Torah or the law. And the lawyer says, "Well, you should love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." This is a well-known Hebrew Bible summary of the whole law. If you will follow those two commandments, you will follow the whole law, or at least the spirit of it. And Jesus responds to the lawyer, says, "You've given the right answer. Do this and you will live." But verse 29, wanting to justify himself, the lawyer asks Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" And that's when Jesus just can't, he has to stop playing it safe. Jesus just can't resist. He has a case of the can't help it, as my granny would say. Jesus then launches into this story about the Samaritans. And maybe we should slow down and discuss why the Samaritans were rivals of the Judeans, the Jews. So Samaria was the capital of the former Rome, the former northern kingdom of Israel.
Mhm.
At a certain point, after the united dynasties of David and Solomon, the kingdoms of Israel and Judea, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, they split, right? Samaria is the capital of that northern kingdom. Jerusalem is the capital of the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom was conquered by the Assyrians. It was under foreign rule. And the Judeans also came under foreign rule.
Eventually.
the Babylonian exile.
Correct.
They're under the rule of the Babylonians. And the Judeans, after the Judean exiles return from Babylon into Jerusalem, after Babylon is conquered by Cyrus the Great, the Persian, they have an increasingly tense relationship with the folks in Samaria.
And one of the things about them, I think that's really interesting is that they used to be part of the same country.
Yeah, they were the
Right.
same people.
They
These
were
are the
the
same
same
folks.
people and they had a very similar religion.
Yeah.
Except for the Samaritans did not go down to Jerusalem, but the Jewish people did, right? They went to the temple. And so that was one of the big divides. And so it was sibling rivalry. It was interpersonal conflict.
Excellent way to put it.
Uh
Excellent way to
it it was it was fierce and it went both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. The Samaritans were nasty to the Judeans, and the Judeans were nasty to the Samaritans. I mean, it's really interesting. They had both been conquered by foreign empires, and yet they had this long-standing spat with each other.
Each other as the bad guy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a commentary on human nature, I think. I had a teacher of mine who said the Bible is not a story about other people, it's a story about us, right? You
Mhm,
think
mhm.
about my gosh, you think about the world that we are in today, and sibling rivalry doesn't even capture the least of it. But anyway, so Jesus, with a case of the can't help it's, tells the lawyer this story about the Samaritan being the good guy because he knows that the lawyer is trying to define neighbor really, really narrowly. If what you're supposed to do to follow the law and inherit eternal life is to love God and love your neighbor, it makes it a lot easier if your neighbor is just the people you like, as opposed to the people with whom you have
Absolutely.
this long standing ethnic, religious, national spat.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And it is funny, right? That question, who is my neighbor, is I think still one that is very, very much at play in the Christian world still in conversation. Who is the neighbor? And sometimes uh the neighbor that's hardest to love is the neighbor that's closest, is the family member, is that person at church, is that friend that hurt you, something like that. And so I think that question's one we're still thinking about.
I certainly have to think about it in my own life. At the conclusion of the parable, Jesus asks the lawyer, which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The lawyer said, the one who showed him mercy. Jesus said to him, go and do likewise. So you have a definition of who is your neighbor that has actually nothing to do with these ethnic, religious, national, political spats that the lawyer and Jesus's fellow Judeans are in. It transcends all of that. There's also a little twist here. The lawyer starts out by trying to narrow the definition of neighbor so that he can figure out who he has to love. Jesus just says, go and do like the Samaritan. Go and do likewise. If
Go
you
do
come along
likewise.
somebody who's in a ditch, help them out. That's it, regardless of who they are. It doesn't have so much to do about your identity. It has to do with your proximity.
People
Who does God put in your way?
who's in your way. Oh, absolutely. I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
Um, I think that one of the things that sometimes we've talked a lot about sort of the Samaritans and the enemy, and it's easy for us to think about that like, oh, in big geopolitical terms. But I also think it's usually more personal than that, right?
Mm,
This is your bully from elementary school
mm,
coming and rescuing you, right?
yeah.
The person you least expected and probably least like. And so you have to think a little bit about how this man felt. I mean, he was desperate. He was left for half dead. But when he finds out who his rescuer is, I mean,
Oh,
that's
wow.
a lot of he's gonna have to sort of change his mind a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting to think what did the man in the ditch after he woke up in the inn and discovered it was a Samaritan who had helped him and he really came to and he
Sort of was able to process it.
absolutely. What did he think? What did that guy think?
I know. I mean, there's nothing mentioned there, of course, but many of us have those situations where we rethink the world. It's not the way we thought it was, and it's humbling, and it's not necessarily everyone's favorite thing to do, but still powerful.
Yeah. I heard our bishop in Connecticut, Jeffrey Mello, say at our diocesan convention this past weekend, Jesus frees us to love each other before we know whether we like each other. And I think that's the
That's
lesson of this parable.
absolutely, that's definitely the lesson of this parable, that sort of loving your neighbor as yourself is very different than liking them or enjoying them or
Mm.
any of that.
Oh, wow. Well, go and do likewise. Go and do like your high school bully did in this story. Your high school bully was the one to help people instead of all the usual
Instead of
cast
the
of
neighbor.
characters, the
Yeah.
folks in the helping professions, as it were. Yeah, wow. Jesus turning the tables on our hearts. And Jesus continues to do that as he goes into the home
Oh,
of
absolutely.
Mary and Martha. Do you want to start out with
Well, I was
that
gonna
too?
say I'll talk a little bit about this, but I know you have some feelings on this one.
I certainly do. I know whose side I'm on, and Jesus ain't on my side. Spoiler alert. Yikes.
So Jesus goes to see his friends Mary and Martha, right? And we hear about them more in the other gospels, but these are close friends of his, and he's
Hmm.
staying in the house. Martha is working hard, trying to prepare to host for Jesus, right? She's the one serving the drinks. She's making sure, he knows what the bathroom is. There's toilet paper everywhere. She's making sure everything's ready to go. Mary is just sitting and talking with
Hmm.
Jesus,
Hmm.
right? And finally, Martha gets fed up with it, as many helpers do eventually, and say, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? That's in verse 40. Tell her to help me. And the Lord answered, Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken from
What is the one thing of which there is
her.
need? What is that one thing? What is he talking about?
Probably enjoying him.
Wow. Yeah. And the truth is, Martha is so busy. She's so busy hosting him, she can't enjoy his company. Yeah, this story is it's hard for me not to take this personally, because I am a helper, and not just because I am like in a helping profession. I'm a member of the clergy, but because it's my personality type.
Very much his personality.
Jewel and I are fans of this personality inventory known as the Enneagram.
Mhm.
We've learned a lot from friends of ours, like your best friend from Divinity School, Kayla Beth Moore. And I've learned a lot from Ian Morgan Cron, who used to lead a ministry at Trinity Church
Mhm.
here in the town of Greenwich, where we are. The Enneagram has different types. And the type that I am, the type that Martha is a number 2. Each of these types has numbers that correspond to them,
Mhm.
and they have little monikers. And so the 2 is the helper. And helpers, when helpers burn out, begin to resent everybody else for not helping. Helpers,
Mhm.
when we are in a healthy state, according to this personality inventory, we are getting fulfillment out of being of service to people. We are we get a lot of fulfillment out of being hosts. But when we burn out, when we get unhealthy, we end up helping people, but then trashing them for not being grateful
Being mad
enough,
at them for not.
be mad at everybody else who's not helping. It's really pretty corrosive what happens inside of us. And this is the biblical archetype of that kind of person, the person
Martha,
like me,
Martha.
Martha, Martha. And I have to say, Jesus isn't reprimanding Martha. Jesus is
Mhm.
not reprimanding people like yours truly. I love the fact he says her name twice. I think that's a sign of tenderness, Martha, Martha. He doesn't just say, hey, yo, Martha, chill, get over here. He says, Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by so much. Come and sit here next to Mary and let's just be with each other for a little while. It's Jesus inviting Martha to do as Mary, to just say, hey, we'll all do the dishes together in a little
In a little
bit.
while. Let's just talk for now.
Let's just
We
talk.
haven't got to spend time together. Yeah, I am. So as a child, I really didn't like this passage. Because I have some Martha in me. I
Yeah.
have some helperness, especially around churches, right? I was always volunteering at my church, reading, doing this and that and that. And then when I went to college, I basically helped with my friend Rebecca, basically ran the church
Yeah.
for 4-ish years. And so reading this, it was like, does God not want me to do this? Well,
Mm.
who's gonna set up communion if I'm not, those sorts of moods. But having done that for so long, volunteering at church and being married to clergy person, I will say when I read this now, it gives me a lot of peace and comfort
Mm.
because I think I read it as not God saying, like, don't do the work. Rather, God saying, don't forget to worship me. And I think that sometimes those of us, especially who are working volunteering in the church, it becomes like a job. I mean, it's literally your job, but it becomes like a task. It's just one more thing to check off the list. And it means that when we're in worship on Sunday, we aren't worshiping because we're thinking about the next thing. We're like, you're like, is my mic on? Is my mic off? Is the person standing up who needs to talk next? I'm wondering about the children and what they've done.
Yeah.
And making sure they all have crayons, but the crayons don't go rolling down the aisle, all kinds of things. And so I think that I take this as you said, like a kind reminder, not reprimand, but a kind reminder saying, don't forget to worship too.
Yeah.
Even like you need to worship too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Churches do. We become places to do instead of places to be. And there are plenty of places to do in our society. And I just have to say, I love all of the Marthas at St.
Oh my
Barnabas Church in
goodness.
Greenwich,
Love you
Connecticut.
so much.
Without the Marthas,
Please don't
including those
stop.
Marthas like me and those who are on the staff, I mean, there would be no place to worship. But it is so important that we remember ultimately the purpose of church is to create space and time to listen to what Jesus is saying and to sit at the Lord's feet, which is what Mary is doing when he comes to her house. Okay, so then Jesus moves on from the home of Mary and Martha, and it says, this is the beginning of chapter 11, verse 1. He was praying in a certain place. We don't know where that place was, but he was praying in a certain place. And after he had finished, one of his disciples said to him, Lord, teach us to pray as John taught his disciples. This is John the Baptist. So just again, I'm going to flag, you've again gotten this back and forth between the Jesus movement and the John the Baptist movement. John is dead at this point. He's been beheaded by Herod Antipas, the tetrarch of Judea, the kind of puppet king of Judea on behalf of the Romans, who were the real bosses in town. But John's disciples are still running around, and Jesus's disciples are like, hey, John the Baptist gave all of his followers these tools. Can you give us some of the same tools? And Jesus says, okay, fine. When you pray, say, Father, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come. Give us each day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, as we ourselves forgive everyone indebted to us. And do not bring us to the time of trial. That's it. According to Luke, that's it. In the other gospels, you get
It's
the
the rest of the pieces.
that add up to the prayer that we're all familiar with from Christian worship, but that's Luke's version.
I will say though that there are some other versions of this that have Father in heaven, rather just Father. But one day I'll talk to you about all the wonderful early versions.
Yeah.
But today is not that day.
I want to give a shout out here to Alice Duff, who is a parishioner of ours at St. Barnabas and is part of a Thursday morning Bible study that I'm doing here in town based on the podcast and on these readings. And Alice's late husband, Lewis, a man of great faith and scholarly devotion to the scriptures, really, really focused on the Lord's Prayer and really, really focused on the translation, the proper way to translate the Lord's Prayer.
So cool.
And at Bible study this past Thursday, Alice said, Lewis, I'm not going to get it exactly right, Alice, please forgive me, but Lewis used to say something like, we have no idea what we're saying. Like if you go back and in the original, you got no idea actually compared with the English, how rich and how deep and sophisticated this prayer really is. We don't have a ton of time to unpack this, and we've only really got the English to work with here today. Let's just start with the word Father. Father, this would have been completely revolutionary for Jesus's followers in his place and time. There's a lot of debate now in the 21st century church about the use of the word Father, whether encouraging Christians to pray to God as Father is reinforcing things like patriarchy and so on, making God out to be a really big version of the pater familias or the patriarch, literally. I don't think, I just say that's not what I focus on when I'm thinking about father language for God. I I do think that Christians are enjoined to address God as Father, in part because Jesus said this is how we ought to address God. I think the reason for it is that it's a kinship term. It's a term of familial intimacy. And for Jesus, just say the Jews in Jesus's time,
Did not.
rabbis in Jesus's time, were not counseling people to call the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob Father. That's not it.
No, no, there was a special word for God's name, and you said the Lord whenever you saw that word, right?
Yep.
Like
The name of God is
the
unspeakable,
name of God
according
is so
to
unspeakable, right? Because it's so powerful, so just unique and unbelievable, right? So to say, "Hey, Dad," is I just
absolutely. And it is hey dad or
it's
hey
literally
daddy.
a "Hey, Dad."
Father is like, I mean, we used to joke that when when we would have children, these children would, come around and bring yours truly yeah, newspaper coffee and slippers and say, "Hello, father,"
Hello, Father.
in some kind of pseudo British accent. This was the joke because everybody kind of found it unbelievable that I would have kids. Come to find out, I'm just a complete mush around my daughter. And so it's all dad, 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 daddy, daddy, daddy. And I'm the one fetching all of her stuff. Of course, this is how it worked out. But anyway, this father here is not father. This is daddy. It's the word is Abba in Jesus's native language of Aramaic, which he would have been speaking here. We get this text in Greek, but he would have given it to them in his native language. And that word for father is Abba, and it means daddy. It's
It is.
incredibly intimate.
It's very close, right? It's like when you say it to your dad when you're like had a great conversation, like daddy,
Mhm.
or like, oh dad. It's not there's not distance there.
Yeah.
The intimacy would be unreal. Most of the people listening probably thought they heard wrong. They
Yeah.
probably would have been like, did
Yeah.
you hear that too?
Yeah.
Because it would be so strange.
It's still shocking to us today, I think, which is one reason why I am devoted to using the traditional language of the scriptures in worship and in prayer and encouraging others to do so too, because we have this super abstract idea of God, I think, as modern people. God is a kind of higher power. God is a sort of force or an invisible something like invisible energy. And this is a personal term that Jesus gives to his disciples and gives to us to
Hmm.
use to address this mysterious something or other that we call God. He doesn't take away the mysterious something or otherness of God entirely, but he says, address this mysterious something or other using a term that would otherwise be reserved for familial relationship.
Hmm.
And for those who have difficult relationships with their fathers, I think, sometimes calling God by this in this fatherly or parental way can be healing of one's
Earthly.
difficult relationships with one's earthly parents because one has a heavenly parent, as it were. Anyway, so there's a lot going on here with Father, but it's powerful, it's revolutionary, and it's innovative for
It is.
Jesus
It
to do it.
is. It is something else to start with that. Now, of course, the next thing he says is, "Hallowed be your name."
Yep.
Right.
Which keeps the mystery.
Right. Exactly. He doesn't just say like Father and then like pretend that God is somebody sitting who you could know everything about. Right. There's still the mystery.
Yep.
And hallowed, of course, means holy.
Yeah. Which is where we get Halloween. We're coming up on the celebration of Halloween, which is the eve of All Hallows Day, also known as All Saints Day, or the feast of the holy ones. So he's
Mhm.
saying, "Holy be your name,
Well,
hallowed be
yes,
thy
hallowed
name."
be your name. And I think Alice Duff's husband is right that there's so much more there that we don't even there's no time. There's no time.
We probably can't even comprehend it, even if we did have time. That's the point of that first one. It's like a double whammy. The first whammy is Father, this incredibly intimate kinship term. And then the second is the mystery, hallowed be your name. You're calling something, you have no idea what it is. You're calling something by this really personal name. There's so much else to unpack in the
So
in the
much.
Lord's Prayer, but I want to jump actually from the Lord's Prayer to the conclusion of chapter 11, because a lot of what we have in between his teaching on prayer, we've had other versions of it. There's a lot of commentary here about the demonic, which we have spoken about before,
Mhm.
but there's something about the exchange between Jesus and the Pharisees and the lawyers that I want to zoom in on. This is verse 37 of chapter 11. While Jesus was speaking, A Pharisee invited Jesus to dine with him, and so Jesus went in and took his place at the table. The Pharisee was amazed to see that he did not first wash before dinner. Then the Lord said to him, "Now you Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and of the dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness. You fools, did not the one who made the outside make the inside also? So give for alms those things that are within, and see, everything will be clean for you." What I want to foreground here is that Jesus' dispute with the Pharisees, the lawyers, the scribes, with the religious and political intelligentsia of his day really comes down to this: whether externals are more important than internals. And it's not that Jesus says externals aren't important, but Jesus always emphasizes that the externals are expressions of what is internal. And what is internal is something which depends on the mercy of God to bring about. It's you get lots of versions of
Mm-hmm.
this debate between Jesus and the Pharisees and the scribes in the course of the Gospels. This is just one more of them. It's very important because at the end of this exchange, this is verse 53 of chapter 11. This takes us back to where we began with the lawyer who was quizzing,
Mm-hmm.
testing Jesus, which prompted the parable of the Good Samaritan. It says, when Jesus went outside, the scribes and the Pharisees began to be very hostile toward him and to cross-examine him about many things, lying in wait for him to catch him in something he might say. This is one of the first steps, not just towards Jerusalem, literally, geographically, but towards the cross, towards what's going to get Jesus killed. People are
Mm-hmm.
beginning to turn on Jesus and they're going to try to catch him in something which they can use to get him in trouble with the Romans.
Absolutely. This is like in a series, right? This is like the hinting at the future, the to be continued
Yeah,
part where you're like, oh, that's a new storyline. And where's that going to go? That's what we have right here. To be continued.
to be continued. And with that, that's all that we've got for this week. We ask you to please share this podcast with a friend, like, share, subscribe, however it is that you get your podcasts. Help us to share the grace of the God of the Bible with a world in great need. To be continued.
To be continued.
And in the meantime, God bless you.